right, so confession here. Noah asked me to preach, and I reluctantly said yes. I failed, however, to ask what the scripture passage was. And then he said, of course, you're going to be covering Ecclesiastes 3. And I was like, oh, crud. That's a song that was popular at one point. This is definitely not a top 100 in my mind. This is a really struggle for me because as we look at this passage and we dive into this, there's some real challenges for us as we look at it. So with that disclaimer, we're going to go straight into the scripture. So we're looking at Ecclesiastes chapter 3, 1 through 22. Okay. So there is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and gather them together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. I think we all can look at that passage, and we each can see points in there where something resonates to us in that. We can all find a place where we've been in life when there was a time to be silent and a time to speak. There was a time to plant and a time to uproot. We all walk through this kind of over and over again. But as I looked at this passage, and as we're faced with these kind of contrasting statements, there's this high, there's this low, sometimes something positive and then something negative. There's a success and a failure. It keeps coming up over and over. The challenge that I face with that, as I look at it, is there's never a win. There's never, I shouldn't say there's never a win. There's never a series of wins. There's always something that balances it out. Whatever positive that comes, there's always something that brings it down. Life keeps coming at you, and some days are better and some days are worse. I think we all walk through that place where we struggle with what the next day is going to bring. What happened today, is it going to be, am I going to carry that over to the next day? And it's a burden. It wears on you. Noah always likes to paint these kind of visual pictures for you. And one of his favorite things is to reference movies. He must watch a lot of movies, like really. My visual picture, and this is probably not the best movie in the world, I realize that, but one that I find great humor in is The Office Space. It's this 90s movie. There's four guys working in this like telecom company, and their boss is this kind of micromanaging moron, and every day he comes and he like hangs on the side of their cubicle, and he's like, so did you remember to put the memo on the new TPS reports? Great. Well, if you didn't, I'll send you another memo. And this kind of goes on. It's the shtick throughout this movie. This keeps going on and on. And these guys are just kind of beat down. And finally, at one of the scenes, they cut away from it, and these guys are out in the middle of this field with the office copy machine that has eaten the cover letter for the TPS reports for like the millionth time. And it's this, there's even a rap parody. It's like Gangster's Paradise that's playing in the background as they destroy this copy machine. And, I laugh about it, but in some ways it's pretty applicable. Like, sometimes our lives feel like that. We're doing the same thing over and over again. It's one thing layered on top of another, but there's little meaning to it. We just kind of gut it out for the next day. And I'm not suggesting that you take the coffee machine and you go and destroy it, but there's certainly days that we experience that when you see one more load of laundry, or when you have to meet with another client. Maybe it's another breakdown in the field, and you're left with this question: what's the point of all of this? Why am I doing this? Now, this question is the same question that the author or teacher arrives at, and we see it both here in this passage, and we see it also, we looked at it previously in chapter 1, verse 3. And as we look at this today, as we walk through it with our lives, you have to remember that the lens that the teacher is speaking to us through, that Solomon is talking to us through, is this lens of worldly wisdom. And when you look at this with the wisdom of the world, it's very easy to come to this point where we ask, what's it all for? Why are we doing this? Let's look at the next verse. This would be 9. And Solomon kind of answers this question. So what do workers gain from their toil? I've seen the burden God has laid on the human race. He's made everything beautiful in its time. He's also set eternity in the human heart. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from the beginning to the end. As the teacher points out the struggles with toil and with work, it points us back to creation. The catch is that creation is broken. What we look at is broken. It's not the way God intended it. Especially if you go back and you look at Genesis chapter 1 and the first part of chapter 2, God created us with a purpose. He created Adam to tend the garden, and it was joyful. We talked about this in our Sunday school class the last week. Like, when is the last time you've had fun hoeing weeds? I mean, really, it's not. We labor at things, they're not enjoyable. But God created us with a purpose. He created us to work, and that work wasn't bad. It wasn't wrong. Now, if we were created to work, but time still drones on, and no matter what we do, you come to this place where you ask, what is the point? So as we struggle and as we labor, what do we gain? Why do we work so hard for everything? Again, what is the point? From the worldly view, and as you look at it in verse 9, it's this. Think of this as like a rhetorical question. What do the workers gain from their toil? What do you gain? What is all your labor for? It's nothing. What do we get to take away from this when we leave? In verse 10 and 11, he kind of tells you why we strive. Verse 10, I've seen the burden God has laid on the human race. He has set eternity in, I've seen the burden that God has laid on the human race. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart, yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. We see how the world works. We even see the beauty in the things created. You can ask anybody who knows me, if I get a chance to get away, the first place we're going to go to is either the desert or the mountains. I want to be in that beauty. I want to be in that creation. Honestly, I want to be someplace where there's no cell phone service. That's my desire, to be away, but to enjoy that creation. Even in that favorite place, the place that I long for, we still hunger for more. We yearn for more things. There's a hunger in us that's not satisfied by the world we see. But we don't understand it, and we certainly can't control it. The world around us, that is. That's why we chase after the next promotion. That's why we seek the next status symbol. We long for something to make us complete. Like there's that void, when there's something that will fulfill us. That's what we hope for. And when we complete that next task, when we succeed, when we gain that next object, we hang on tight to it, don't we? Even though it's fleeting, it fades, and it's a painful lesson. And you come to this conclusion. God understands it all and controls it all, and we certainly don't. That bad philosophy, that bad wisdom that Solomon uses, and he's using it to teach a point. That wisdom, that philosophy interprets how we view or navigate the world around us. This idea that we know how the world around us works, so this is how I should work in the world. The idea that you kind of get out of it what you put into it. We know how to act in society. We know the cues from people. How close do you stand? How far should I be away from you? We know how we work. We know what compensation looks like. We all have this idea how the day in and day out works, yet we struggle. And Solomon, adopting this bad wisdom, tries to prove that. In verse 12, he says this. He says, "I know that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live." We've all heard that argument. Do what makes you happy. It makes sense to us in a very real way. Make sure you feel good and have fun while you're doing it. Even in the workplace, this is preached to us. If you love what you're doing, you'll never work a day in your life. We say that like it's sage wisdom. But that kind of thought makes the assumption that work is bad, that toil to struggle is wrong. Or do what makes you happy. If you can't have fun doing it, why are you doing that? And unfortunately, I've seen this play out actually very recently in a job interview. Their idea was that if life is too challenging, if this project is too tasking, then it must not be God's will. This is such kind of flawed logic. When has God ever kept you from working through something? I think we can argue that in the times that we struggle, that's probably where we come closest to God. So why would He withhold that from you? Does He protect you? Absolutely. But I still think God allows us to experience challenges just so we learn, if nothing else, to rely on Him. So if work is bad and pointless, and we can't control it, have no effect on how anything goes, at least I can gain some satisfaction. Like who doesn't love it when you get a good paycheck at the end of your pay period? Or who doesn't love it when you get an accolade for something you do? All that is good. There's no question. Again, we see Solomon make this observation, and it's a true observation. This is verse 13. That each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in their toil. This is a gift from God. I mean, truly, God blesses us in that fact that we do get to experience satisfaction in the things that we accomplish, the things that we do. But the challenge is when you leave it at just that. If that's the end of it, it's just the satisfaction that I completed the task. It's very much the world's view, but if you think that is all there is, then life gets pretty pointless. And all you're left with is kind of this physically oriented, hunger-oriented, kind of get what you can, eat what you can, and then you die mentality. And that is a pretty low place with very little hope. Again, Solomon strengthens this argument kind of about that hopelessness in the human existence or the chaos even. It says, I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it, and nothing can be taken from it. God does it so that people will fear him. Whatever is has already been, and what will be has been before. And God will call the past into account. In the last couple of weeks, I actually got to go to a funeral from a parent of a coworker of mine. And the passage, this first part of this passage was read at that funeral, the speaking of passing of time. And it got to me thinking as I was working through this passage, like, what kind of mark am I going to make on this world? How long will I be remembered when I am gone? And with the technology today, you can ask your phone that question. How long will I be remembered after I die? Get some interesting search responses, but overall, they say about 80 years. So that's kind of your shelf life. Your memory has a shelf life of about 80 years. That's a hard thing. 3 generations and you'll be forgotten. God is going to do whatever he wants. He always has and will. So you might as well just have a good time. That'd be what the teacher speaks to. God's sovereignty is presented here as kind of this empty, almost heartless or calloused mentality. And it's certainly not the comforting doctrine we seek as we look for hope in what feels like a relatively hopeless situation. God has this cycle, and he keeps things spinning. So don't try to fight it. Again, the teacher, Solomon, he doubles down on this bad philosophy, speaking to kind of the chaos that's present, really pointing out this kind of the lack of justice in the world. And this is in verse 16. And I saw something else under the sun. In the place of judgment, wickedness was there. In the place of justice, wickedness was there. And Solomon sees this and he tells himself, don't worry, God's going to make sure that the unjust pay. This is one of these phrases that my grandma would use. This is a good Southern lady. They're going to get their comeuppance. There's going to be, they're going to pay for it. And so you see Solomon in verse 17. He says, I said to myself, God will bring into judgment both the righteous and the wicked. For there will be a time for every activity, a time to judge every deed. I mean, that's what we hope for. We want the wrongs to be righted. We want to see the good persons succeed and the bad person to fail. It doesn't always work out that way. And this in kind of this last part of this passage, you see the teacher argue with himself that no, God is just doing this to prove a point, kind of about nothing having meaning. Really, that we're no different than animals. In verse 18, I also said to myself, as for humans, God tests them so that they see they are like the animals. Surely the fate of human beings is like that of animals. The same fate awaits them both. As one dies, so dies the other. All have the same breath. Humans have no advantage over animals. Everything is meaningless. All go to the same place. All come from dust, and to dust they return. Who knows of the human spirit, whether it rises upward, and if the spirit of the animal goes down to the earth? I don't know how you get away from it, but as we finish this section, you're left kind of, certainly for me, there's kind of this hopeless state. The philosophy that we are kind of slaves bound to time. I might as well have a good time while I'm here. And we should enjoy our work because I have no idea what's going to come or what kind of hope there is for the future. Solomon caps this off in verse 22. So I saw that there is nothing better for a person than to enjoy their work, because that is their lot. For who can bring them to see what will happen after them? I was struck with just kind of what a sad place to live. We're left longing for something more or something better. But, going through that, it's a depressing passage in my mind. But the joy comes that we have the second half of this story. For so long, we've been looking at this through worldly wisdom, not God's wisdom. But the good news is that we have the gospel. Like I said, we have the second half of this story. And the gospel gives us this hope that there is a better way to live. There's a better life. We see that time with God is certainly not wasted. We're going to jump ahead a long ways. We're going to look at Romans 12, verse 1. We're going to look at these words from Paul, and it's this, what it looks like to live a life full of purpose, and really the question that kind of spurs out of that is, how do you go about carrying that out? So let's look at verse 12, chapter 12, verse 1. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. If you look at the New English translation, that last part of that line says, this is your true and proper service. Both of them are really point to what our purpose is. Paul casts this vision for a life full of purpose, and it's definitely not wasted time. This idea to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice to God. This is what we're called to do with our time. My day isn't about me burning time to get to the weekend. I laugh at that. Like, at the clinic in the back there, I have a computer where it's a time clock, and it's got the schedule for the day in it. And it's funny, like, if they don't know you're watching, like I can walk by, and you can stare at a schedule for a really long time, and it kind of looks like you're busy, but it's burning time. Like, it's not going to change. I mean, people, what's already established for today is going to happen. It's not going to change. But we do that. I'm just working for the next day. I'm working for the weekend. My day is lived out for a purpose because I have faith that God will use what I have to offer. Either way, this paints a completely different picture of what toil or work would be, just a totally different light or a different lens compared to what the preacher describes. This is kind of the thoughtful way to live. The purpose and joy is captured in the everyday seasons, whether it's the stops and starts, the impending time crunch. When you walk through them with God, knowing that He has the ability to use kind of whatever situation you're in, what an offering to Him. So the question, how does your day play out as a reasonable service of God? Whether you're a farmer or a teacher or mom or dad, how does your daily routine serve as a true and proper worship? I know I asked this question kind of repeatedly here, but I want you to think about how you can help people come to a place where they can see Christ, where they can experience Christ, even if it's in the most mundane experience. And that's part of that's kind of the mercies of God. God could have left us to live out a life with that lens that the teacher describes. We could be stuck in that machine of time, kind of just a cog in the wheel. But because His mercy, He saves us to an eternal hope. In Ecclesiastes 3:21, he asks this kind of question about the soul, whether does it actually go to heaven or does it go down to earth? No different than the animals. And if you don't believe that there's good news for your soul, then this philosophy, this idea that there's use, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The good wisdom God gives us brings hope for our souls. That there's a reason or a purpose for what we do, and we can trust God with what He is doing through us. That eternal hope transforms our earthly time into something useful. How do we think about this? When we put our faith in Jesus to be rescued from the punishment or from our sins, God mercifully saves us. Then we live by faith. We get to express the joy of being free from that broken life, from that sin that we lived in. When we live in faith, then that time isn't wasted. When we walk in faith, our time is redeemed. God works through us, and time certainly isn't wasted. Those moments aren't wasted. The little things that we take for granted aren't wasted. When we walk in faith, because of His mercy, those tiny moments are given to Him and become faithful victories. The challenge, there's many challenges in this, but one of the things that I keep thinking about is God big enough to transform those little things in your life, whether it's the days, the hours, the minutes, the seconds. Do I compartmentalize? God, you can have the big thing, or you can have all of it. You can work in the little pieces, the day in and the day out. That idea, again, of toil is very real to us. And, I know for a long time I had a way different perspective of what I would be when I grew up. I wanted to be a mechanical engineer. I had no intent of being a veterinarian. That wasn't even on the scope of my mind. I had a very specific plan in my head. I wanted to design cars. I wanted to build race cars. And I had it all laid out. But the longer I was in that program, I began to realize, one, A, I am not a good student, at least not in that light. And B, it was going to take me down a path where I ended up spending a lot of time behind a desk without interaction with people. I was going to, which was kind of counter to who I am. I don't do well behind computer screens. And thankfully, God's hand working in a lot of things, I had some really hard conversations with the dean of the vet school, told me to get out, and my dad, who spoke very gently and graciously and tried to guide me down a different career path. And thankfully they did. One, I would have never met my wife if I had stayed in that line. Praise be to God for that, for sure. But the underlying question is, how is my behavior different? Whether I'm in that engineering role or if I'm being a veterinarian, how is my behavior different than the next person? I think that's a challenge for all of us as we're called to live out Christianity and be a reflection of Christ to those people around us. How do I live that out? What makes me any different? So how do I preg check cows? How do I vaccinate that biting little chihuahua and that be a service to God? Whether you've done the 4th load of laundry today, or you're filling out forms, or you're wiping a snotty nose for the umpteenth time. Or maybe it's at the end of the field and there's a breakdown and you're trying to work this through with your employee. These all bring us to a point someplace where we see it as pointless or a waste of time. But what if that moment, that place of struggle, that place of this feels fruitless, what if that's an opportunity for God to use that as a faithful victory? Time with God is never wasted. So this week, I pray, I hope that you give every moment that living sacrifice, that life dedicated to God. I pray that you give those tiniest things up to Him, and just wait for God to move and make an internal impact in those little moments.